The starfield outside the viewport was a familiar tapestry to Captain Dale of the Kethra's will. His ship, a sleek dagger of polished alloy and deep blue energy conduits, moved with a quiet hum of power. Today, however, his attention was not on the stars but on the small, blocky vessel holding position off his starboard side. The human ship, called the Steadfast, looked utterly primitive to him. It was angular, with visible hull plates and thermal radiator panels. It spoke of a species that built for function, not form. Dale smoothed the front of his uniform, his deep purple skin contrasting with the silver fabric. His people, the Kthari, had joined the Galactic Accord centuries ago. Their history was written in glorious battles and honorable conquests. Strength was not just an asset. It was the core of their culture. Assessing new member species was a duty, but this one felt like a formality. The data packets on humanity were unimpressive. Moderate gravity world, limited lifespan, no natural weapons, a recent and turbulent industrial history. They were, by all measurable standards, physically weak. "The human delegation is ready for transport, Captain," said Commander Vora, her voice calm. She stood beside him, her eyes also on the Steadfast. "Let us greet our newest peers," Dale said, unable to keep a slight edge from his voice. The transport shuttle from the human ship docked with a solid, mechanical thunk that echoed through the Kethra's elegant bay, another mark of their crude technology. The hatch opened. The first human to step out was a female, Sumi. She was dressed in a simple, dark blue jumpsuit with minimal insignia. Her black hair was tied back neatly. She was short, even by human standards, and smiled warmly. Behind her was a male, Jean. He was taller but slender, his eyes immediately scanning the docking bay's architecture, the energy field grids, the support struts. He carried a small datapad and wore a similar jumpsuit, slightly stained with what looked like lubricant. "Captain Dale," Sumi said, her voice clear. A small device on her collar translated her words into smooth galactic standard. "On behalf of humanity, thank you for this welcome. This is Jean, one of our lead engineers." Jean gave a short, polite nod, his attention already drifting to a nearby power relay conduit. "Your magnetic coupling system is impressive," he said, almost to himself. "Very clean emitter design." Dale blinked. Not a greeting, but a technical observation. "It is standard," he replied, slightly off balance. "Welcome to the Kethra's will. We have arranged a tour of our primary systems. We trust it will be enlightening." The tour began. Dale led them through the ship's heart. He showed them the pulse cannon batteries, rows of polished barrels that glowed with a soft blue light. "Each discharge can vaporize a small asteroid," he said, a note of pride in his voice. Sumi listened politely. "Fascinating. What is your cooling cycle rate? And how do you manage power draw from the main reactor during sustained fire?" Dale paused. "The systems are automated," he said. "The warriors focus on the target, not the machinery." Jean crouched slightly to look at the housing of a cannon. "A single plasma conduit feeds this entire bank?" he asked. "If that conduit fails, you lose all 4 cannons. Have you considered a split-line redundancy?" Commander Vora watched the exchange quietly, her head tilted. They moved to the main hangar, where squads of Kthari shock troopers drilled. The troops were tall, their carapace-like armor adding to their formidable size. They moved in perfect unison, their energy staffs cutting through the air with a sharp buzz. The display was meant to inspire awe. The humans watched. Sumi's smile remained, but her eyes were analytical. Jean watched for a minute, then looked up at the hangar's ceiling supports, then down at the floor grates. "Do your troops always train in this gravity?" Jean asked. "Your ship's artificial gravity is set at 1.2 standard G, correct? But your homeworld is 0.9. Training at a higher gravity is smart for strength, but it must increase fatigue rates. What is your injury statistic for joint stress during extended deployments?" Captain Dale stared at him. The question was not about the warrior's skill, their honor, or their battle prowess. It was about logistics and wear and tear. Felt disrespectful, but not intentionally so. It was as if the human was looking at a masterpiece of art and only checking the quality of the canvas. "Our warriors are tough," Dale said, his tone cooler. "They endure." "Of course," Sumi said quickly, picking up on the shift. "The discipline is remarkable. We are here to learn." The final stop was the bridge, a wide room with panoramic viewports and sleek control stations. Dale stood in the center, the starfield before him. "From here we command. We see the enemy. We decide the fate of battles." Gene was looking at a secondary engineering station, his fingers hovering over the controls but not touching them. "Your primary and secondary navigation controls are on the same circuit board," he muttered. "If that board is hit by an ion pulse, you lose both. You have a manual backup?" "We have shields to prevent such hits," Dale said, his patience thinning. He turned to Sumi. "Your species has seen little interstellar conflict. You must value peace." Sumi met his gaze. "We value stability, Captain. Our history has many conflicts. We have learned their cost. We now focus on building things that last." Dale nodded, believing he finally understood. They were not warriors. They were builders, technicians. They feared battle so much they hid behind engineering and talk of peace. As the humans were escorted back to their shuttle, he felt a sense of disappointed certainty. Their questions were strange, Vora noted as the Steadfast detached. "They are not a martial people," Dale concluded, watching the blocky ship drift away. "They are careful. They are afraid. They look at a weapon and see only what can break. It is the mindset of those who hope to avoid a fight at all costs." On the Steadfast, Gene updated his files with observations on the Kthari ship's design vulnerabilities. Sumi prepared her report. "They are proud, and their technology is powerful but inflexible," she said. Gene nodded, not looking up from his screen. "Their power grid is elegant but centralized. One good shock in the right place and they go dark." He said it not with malice, but with the simple tone of someone stating a fact. It was their job to see what others missed, to see the cracks so they knew how things might break, and how to survive when they did. The following day, the humans were invited for a formal dinner in the Kethra's Will's officers' mess. The room was long and elegant, with a dark table that seemed to be made of polished stone. Soft light came from panels in the walls. Captain Dale sat at the head of the table. Commander Vora was to his right. Sumi and Gene sat across from each other. The meal was served. It was a Kthari dish, a kind of steamed protein with a shimmering sauce. The humans ate carefully. The flavors were strange but not unpleasant. The conversation was polite. Dale spoke of great battles in Kthari history. He described the Battle of the Silent Stars, where a single Kthari fleet held a pass against the Ravnik horde for 10 solar cycles. Sumi listened. 10 cycles is a very long time, she said. The logistical support for that must have been incredible. How did you manage food and water? And what about the mental health of the warriors stationed there for so long? Dale paused, a piece of food halfway to his mouth. Again, the human asked about supply lines and psychology, not about the glory of the combat. "Our warriors are trained to endure all hardships," he said. "Their will is their sustenance." Gene, who had been quiet, looked up. "On generation ships, during our early space travel, we learned that will is not enough. People need routine, a sense of purpose beyond the fight, or they break." "What was the purpose you gave them after the 3rd cycle, when the fight was just normal?" The table went quiet. Vora watched Gene with sharp interest. Dale put his utensil down. "The purpose was their duty, the honor of the Kthari people. To let the horde pass was unthinkable." "It is a powerful reason," Sumi said, her tone diplomatic. "We have similar stories. But we often find that duty alone is a flame that burns bright but fast. It must be sheltered from the wind of endless time. We had to learn to build structures around that flame to keep it alive. It seems your people are very strong to keep it burning so long with duty alone." Dale was not sure if it was a compliment or not. He decided to change the subject. "Your ship, the Steadfast, it has many external fittings. It is not a warship design. It's an engineering and exploration vessel," Gene said. Its job is to go places, see things, and come back, no matter what. A noble goal, Dale said. But the galaxy can be violent. Your ship seems slow. It has no major weapon systems that we detected. Do you not fear encountering a threat you cannot talk away? Sumi took a sip of water. Fear is a useful tool, Captain. It tells you what to prepare for. We do not expect to win a gunfight with a dedicated warship. So we prepare not to be where the bullets are. And if we cannot avoid them, we prepare to take the hit and keep going. To run away? Dale asked, his voice neutral. To survive? Jean corrected him, his tone just as neutral. If you are dead, the fight is over. If you are alive, the fight continues. Maybe not today, but eventually. Everything we build starts with that idea. After dinner, Dale offered a tour of the ship's training facilities. He wanted to show them real strength. The training deck was large. Kthari warriors sparred with energy staffs. The air smelled of ozone and effort. The impacts were loud. The warriors moved with powerful, sweeping strikes. The humans observed from the viewing gallery. Jin's eyes followed the power cables on the ceiling, then the safety field emitters along the edge of the sparring floor. One particularly large warrior disarmed his opponent with a loud crack of energy. The defeated warrior knelt, head bowed. The victor gave a short, sharp shout of triumph. The stronger warrior proves his skill, Dale explained. The weaker learns his place. This constant testing makes the whole stronger. Sumi watched the defeated warrior stand and walk slowly to the side. He was favoring his left leg. Does the weaker warrior get medical attention immediately? Or does he wait until the training session is finished? Dale frowned. A minor injury is a lesson. He will have it treated later. I see, Sumi said softly. She made a note on her small pad. Near the end of the tour, they passed a maintenance bay. A group of lower-ranking Kthari were repairing a damaged energy cell from a fighter craft. The work was messy. The Kthari technicians worked in silence, looking tired. Jean stopped. He looked at the procedure. They were using a laser torch to melt a broken connector. Your torch frequency is wrong for that alloy, he said before he could stop himself. The Kthari technicians looked up, surprised. You're overheating the surrounding material. It will become brittle and crack again. One of the technicians looked at his tool, then at the part. He seemed unsure. Dale felt a flash of irritation. This human was giving unsolicited advice to his crew. Our technicians are trained in standard procedures, he said. Standard procedures can be wrong, Jean said simply. He pointed. See the discoloration there? That's a heat stress fracture starting. If that fails in flight, you lose the cell, maybe the fighter. He reached slowly into his pocket, pulling out his datapad. I can show you the thermal properties of that material. Your torch is set for a denser alloy. The lead technician looked from Jean to Captain Dale. Dale, after a moment, gave a stiff nod. Jean stepped into the bay, careful not to touch anything. He showed the technician his screen, pointing at graphs and numbers. He spoke in a low, technical voice. The Kthari listened, their suspicion turning to curiosity. They adjusted the torch setting. The next weld was cleaner, smoother. Jean nodded. Better. It will hold. As they walked away, Dale was silent. The human had just improved a warship's repair protocol in 2 minutes. He had not done it to show off. He had done it because he saw something breaking and he could not stop himself from fixing it. Later, in their quarters on the Steadfast, Jean reviewed the day's data. Their culture is built on the idea of the strong individual, he said to Sumi. But their technology is a network. Networks fail at the weakest link, not the strongest one. Sumi was writing her report. They see fear as a shameful thing, something to be conquered and thrown away. Jean looked at her. A soldier who isn't afraid is not brave. He is just unaware, or he has nothing to lose. Both are dangerous in command. On the Kethra's will, Dale sat in his ready room. Vora joined him. The human engineer, Vora said. He did not correct our technician to gain status. He did it to prevent a future failure. Yes, Dale said. He looks at our ship and sees all the ways it could break. Yes, it is a strange way to see the world. It is the way of a species that expects things to break, Dale said, staring out at the stars. They are not fearless. They are preemptively afraid. They fear everything that could go wrong, so they try to plan for it. It is a mentality of weakness. Vora was quiet for a moment. Is it weakness, Captain? Or is it a different kind of strength? They are not preparing for victory. They are preparing for things to go very, very badly. And then to continue anyway. Dale did not have an answer. He dismissed Vora and remained alone, looking at the quiet, blocky shape of the Steadfast against the nebula's glow. He felt a strange unease. He was a master of battle. But he was beginning to wonder if these humans were masters of something else entirely. Something that came after the battle. The joint mission was simple. A nearby nebula, catalogued as GC-77, had unstable ionic activity. The Kethra's will was to map the energy fluctuations. The Steadfast was invited along to observe Kthari sensor technology in action. It was a routine task, a final demonstration of capability before the assessment period ended. Captain Dale stood on his bridge. The nebula filled the main viewport, a vast cloud of purple and blue gas, lit from within by the faint glow of newborn stars. It was beautiful in a chaotic way. Deploy the sensor array, Dale ordered. From the belly of his ship, a dozen delicate probes shot out, their trails glowing faintly. They spread out like seeds. On his screens, data began to stream in. The humans should take note. Our probes can withstand ionic pressure that would fry their simpler systems. On the Steadfast, Jean and Sumi were indeed watching. They were on their own smaller bridge. Their captain, a calm older man named Park, observed quietly. Jean watched the Kthari sensor data on a shared feed. Their resolution is amazing, he admitted. But the probes are all linked to a single command frequency. And look at their power draw. They're pulling a lot from the Kethra's main grid. Sumi nodded. Elegant but centralized, just like everything else. The first hour passed quietly. The Kethras will move deeper into the fringes of the nebula, its smooth hull reflecting the swirling colors. The Steadfast followed at a respectful distance, its boxy shape looking out of place. Then the nebula seemed to wake up. It started as a subtle shift in the energy readings. Commander Vora noticed it first. Captain, ionic density is rising faster than projected. There's a buildup. Before Dale could respond, the space around the ships shimmered. A wave of invisible energy, a violent ionic surge, rushed out from the nebula's heart. It was like a silent tsunami in the sea of gas. On the Kethra's will, the effect was immediate and devastating. The sophisticated sensor array, so delicate and powerful, was the first thing to die. Every screen on the bridge flickered and went dark. The main lights snapped off, replaced by a dim, red emergency glow. A deep, unsettling groan echoed through the ship's frame as power systems faltered. The hum of the engines dropped to a sickly whine. Report, Dale shouted, grabbing his console as the artificial gravity wavered for a second. Total sensor blackout, an officer called out. Primary power is fluctuating. The surge fried the main regulator. We're on backups. Shields. Shields are down to 20% and failing. The ionic interference is constant. We cannot see. We cannot navigate. Alarms blared through the ship, a harsh, clanging sound that spoke of multiple system failures. Dale felt a cold knot in his stomach. In open battle, he knew what to do. This was not battle. This was the universe itself turning against them. It was chaos. On the Steadfast, the lights also dipped, but only for a second. A different, softer alarm sounded. A pulse tone. Captain Park leaned forward. Report. Jin's hands were already flying over his console. Ionic surge. Magnitude 9. Our external sensors are offline. Switching to passive optical and short-range radar. The main view screen shifted, showing a grainy, computer-generated image based on radar pings. They could see the vague shape of the Kethra's will, lit by its own emergency lights, drifting. Comms are jammed by the interference, Sumi said. Only short range, tight beam might get through. Power status? Captain Park asked, his voice calm. Reactors are sealed and shielded. We took a hit, but we're at 80%. Engines are responsive. Hull integrity is solid. Jin's voice was focused, almost flat. He was in his element. The surge will continue in waves. Next big one in approximately 90 seconds. Park nodded. Open a channel to the Kethra's will. Tight beam. Audio only. On the Kthari bridge, Dale was trying to restore order. The chaos was tangible. Officers were shouting about failing systems. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It was from the human ship, sharp and clear despite the static. Kethra's will, this is steadfast, Captain Park. Do you read? Dale hit his console. We read. Our systems are failing. Sensors are gone. We copy. Park's voice was steady. A rock in the electronic storm. The interference is cyclic. Advise you reroute all non-essential power to structural integrity and life support. Your main grid is vulnerable. Dale looked at Vora. The human's advice was what he should have already ordered. Do it, he barked. We are detecting a large debris field on our rudimentary radar. Park's voice came again. It is on a drift path. It is headed for your position. You cannot see it. Do you have any thrust control? An officer shook his head. Engines are offline for reboot. We have no maneuverability. Dale felt the cold knot tighten. To be blind, adrift, and about to be hit by rocks in a storm. It was an ignoble way for a warship to die. On the Steadfast, the radar image showed the problem clearly. A cloud of nebula debris, chunks of metallic rock and ice, was moving slowly but directly toward the drifting Kthari ship. Jean looked at the data, then at Captain Park. Their starboard side will take the impact. Their engine housing there is exposed. A direct hit will cripple them. Park stared at the screen for 3 long seconds. The silence on the human bridge was total. Everyone knew the options. They could try to warn the Kthari and move away, saving themselves. The Steadfast had power. Could run. Calculate an intercept course, Park said, his voice still calm. Use the hull. Break up the largest fragments with the forward kinetic projectors. Sumi's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Jean simply nodded. His fingers danced across the console. Course plotted. It will put us directly in the debris path. Impact probability high. Do it, Park said. The Steadfast's engines fired, not away from the danger, but toward it. The blocky ship turned, positioning itself between the drifting Kethra's will and the oncoming cloud of stone and ice. On the Kethra's will, Captain Dale could only stare at the static-filled screen where the human ship's icon had been. The short-range comms crackled again. Kethra's will, this is Steadfast. We are moving to intercept the debris field. We will attempt to fragment the larger pieces. Your starboard engine housing is the primary target zone. Recommend you divert all remaining power to reinforce your aft shields on that side. Do you copy? Dale was frozen for a second. Intercept. The human ship was smaller, slower, and far less armed. They were going to put themselves in the path of the debris. Captain! Vora's voice broke his shock. The humans are moving. Their trajectory. They are placing themselves between us and the debris. Dale saw it on the only screen that still had a vague tactical display. The blocky icon of the Steadfast was moving across their blind spot. A wave of disbelief washed over him. It was a suicidal gesture. A brave one, but pointless. That debris would tear their light hull apart. Divert all power to aft shields, starboard side. Dale commanded, his voice rough. He had to trust the human's assessment. It was all he had. On the bridge of the Steadfast, there was no drama. The crew worked. The ship shuddered as it entered the leading edge of the debris cloud. Small particles pinged against the hull, a sound like distant rain. Kinetic projectors ready, Jean reported, his eyes locked on the radar image, targeting the 3 largest fragments. Fire at will, Captain Park said. The Steadfast had no energy cannons. It had launchers for solid projectiles, designed for clearing small obstructions or for emergency propulsion. Now they were weapons. Two dull thumps vibrated through the deck as heavy slugs shot out. On the radar, one of the larger tumbling rocks shattered into 100 smaller pieces. Direct hit on Fragment 1, Jean said. Fragment 2 is off course. Fragment 3 is still on path. Impact with us in 15 seconds. Brace for impact, Park said, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair. All hands brace. Sumi tightened her straps. She looked at Jean. He gave her a quick, tight nod. It was not a nod of reassurance, but of shared focus. This was the plan. Take the hit. The largest remaining piece of debris, a jagged mass of iron and ice the size of a ground vehicle, tumbled toward them. The steadfast thrusters fired, adjusting the angle. They were not trying to dodge it completely. They were positioning to take the blow on the strongest part of their forward hull, a thick, reinforced section that housed the primary meteoroid shielding. The impact was a deafening, metallic roar. The entire ship jerked violently. Alarms sounded different from the Kthari alarms. These were clear, specific tones. Hull breach section for Alpha. Containment doors sealing. A calm computer voice announced. The lights flickered but held. Report, Park called out. Forward shield layer is compromised, Jean said, his voice raised over the ringing in the air. Inner hull is intact. No loss of atmosphere beyond the sealed section. Structural integrity is holding at 87%. He was already working, rerouting power and sending repair drones to the area. We are still in the debris path. Continuing intercept. The ship shook again from more small impacts. The view from their passive optical cameras showed a nightmare scene of silent, tumbling rock and ice swirling around them, illuminated by their own navigation lights. And beyond it all, the dark, sleek shape of the Kethra's will, safe for the moment in the pocket of space the humans were clearing. On the Kthari ship, they could not see clearly, but they could hear. Over the open comms channel, they heard the sounds from the Steadfast. They heard the impacts. They heard the calm computer voice listing damage. They heard Captain Park's steady orders. They did not hear panic. They did not hear screams. They heard the sounds of a crew doing a dangerous job. Another loud crunch came over the speaker. Portside radiator array is damaged, a human voice reported. Leaking coolant. Shutting down array 3. Acknowledged. Reroute power. Park's voice responded. Dale listened, standing rigidly on his own stricken bridge. The humans were being methodically torn apart piece by piece to protect his ship, and they were reporting it like they were reading a checklist. The cold knot in his stomach had been replaced by a hot, shameful confusion. This was not how warriors fought. Warriors sought glory, a clean victory. This was a brutal, ugly sacrifice. It was not tactics. It was engineering. They were calculating their own destruction meter by meter to preserve the whole mission. After what felt like an eternity, the shaking and the pinging sounds from the comms began to lessen. Debris field is passing. Jin's voice came through, laced with static but clear. Major threats are cleared. You are in the clear, Kethra's will. Captain Park's voice followed. Kethra's will. What is your status? Do you have any engine control? Dale looked at his engineering officer, who finally gave a thumbs up. Engines are back online at minimal power. We have thrust. Good, Park said. There was a slight strain in his voice now, a hint of exhaustion. Suggest you move to these coordinates, away from the densest ionic interference. We will follow. The Steadfast pulled away from the debris cloud. On the Kthari's slowly rebooting external cameras, Dale finally saw it. The human ship's front was scarred and dented. One whole section looked crumpled. A faint cloud of frozen coolant glittered around its side like sad confetti. It was a wounded thing, but its engines glowed steadily. It was moving under its own power. The two ships, one elegant and blind, the other battered but functional, moved slowly to a calmer spot in the nebula's fringe. The ionic storm still raged around them, but they were in a relative pocket of quiet. Silence settled on the bridge of the Kethra's will. The alarms had stopped. The red emergency lights still glowed. The crew looked at their captain, and then at the image of the damaged human ship on their screen. Captain Dale could not find words. The humans' maneuver had not been a flashy act of heroism. It had been a slow, brutal, and horrifyingly practical solution. They had used their own ship as a shield, not because they were not afraid of being hit. They had known they would be hit. They had planned for it. He thought of Jin's questions about single points of failure. He thought of Sumi's questions about endurance and morale. He looked at his own beautiful, powerful ship, which had been rendered helpless by a natural event. Then he looked at the ugly, damaged Steadfast, which had just weathered that same event and saved them both. For the first time, he understood. The humans did not build their ships to win fights. They built them to survive them. And in that moment, survival had looked like the strongest thing in the galaxy. The two ships sat in the quiet pocket of space. The Kethra's will was like a noble bird with a broken wing. Its systems were slowly coming back online, but it was fragile. The Steadfast was like a beaten old transport truck, covered in dents and scrapes, but its engine still idled reliably. Captain Dale stared at the image of the human ship on his screen. The silence on his bridge was heavy. His crew moved quietly, speaking in low tones as they worked on repairs. The usual confident hum of the ship was gone, replaced by an uneasy stillness. Finally, he turned to Commander Vora. "Open a channel. Invite Captain Park and his senior officers aboard. We will offer what assistance we can." His pride stung at the words. He was the one who should be offering protection, not receiving it. But the facts were plain. The human ship had taken damage to protect them. Protocol and a deeper, unfamiliar feeling, something like honor, demanded recognition. On the Steadfast, the invitation came through. Captain Park looked at Jean and Sumi. Jin's arm was in a temporary sling. He had been thrown against a console during a hard impact. Sumi had a small bandage on her forehead. "Will you go?" Park asked them. "Yes," Sumi said. "We need to see if they are truly okay. Not just their ship, but their people." Jean just nodded. He was already thinking about the Kthari power grid reboot. He wanted to see it firsthand. The trip over in the shuttle was quiet. The human pilots navigated carefully past the new, jagged scars on their own ship's hull. When they landed in the Kethra's Wills Bay, the atmosphere was different. The Kthari crew who greeted them did not stand with formal pride. They stood quietly, and many of them bowed their heads slightly as the humans walked past. It was not a bow of submission, but of respect. Captain Dale met them at the entrance to the main corridor. He looked at Captain Park, then at the injured Jean and Sumi. The words he had prepared felt wrong in his mouth. "Your actions," he began, his voice stiff. "You saved my ship and my crew. We owe you a debt." Captain Park gave a small, tired smile. "We are all members of the Accord. We help. It is what you do." Dale led them not to the Grand Officer's mess, but to a smaller, private meeting room near the medical bay. The room was functional, with a table and some chairs. He had ordered food and drink, simple things that were easy to eat. They sat. For a few minutes, they talked about practical matters. Damage reports. System status. The nebula's continued ionic activity. Jean asked detailed questions about the Kthari power regulator failure. A Kthari engineer was brought in, and the two of them spoke in technical terms, their heads close together over a datapad. Dale watched this. The human was injured, his ship was wounded, and his first concern was understanding the failure mode of their equipment, to prevent it from happening again. As the conversation lulled, Dale found his eyes fixed on Sumi's bandage, then on Jin's sling. The question that had been burning in his mind since the first impact roared to the surface. He could not hold it back. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. His voice was low and earnest, stripped of its usual command. "Your actions in the debris field," he said, looking from Park to Sumi to Jean. "You positioned your ship as a shield. You allowed it to be struck. Repeatedly. You knew the damage it would cause." He paused, struggling to find the right words in galactic standard. Are humans not afraid of battle? Not afraid of destruction? He had asked it thinking they would speak of courage, of duty, of a warrior's heart. Sumi put down her drink. She looked at Jean, who had stopped his technical discussion to listen. She looked back at Dale, her expression soft but serious. "Captain," she said slowly, "we are terrified of it." Dale blinked. He had not expected that. Sumi continued, "We are so afraid of battle, of destruction, of loss, that we think of little else. Our entire history is a lesson in fear. We have learned what happens when you are not afraid enough, when you are not prepared." Jean spoke up, his voice matter-of-fact. "Fear is data. Tells you what to plan for. You saw our ship take hits. We have a compartmentalized hull. Each section can be sealed off. We have 3 redundant life support systems. The bridge can run on its own battery for 72 hours. We drill for hull breaches every month. Everyone, even our cooks, knows how to seal a door and get to a safe room." Captain Park nodded. "We do not fear the first hit, Captain Dale. We expect it. We plan for the second and the third and the 10th. We fear what comes after the battle more than the battle itself. We fear not being able to put things back together." Sumi added, "You asked about our history. We have a saying from one of our old wars. The soldier who digs the deepest trench is not a coward. He is a realist. You saw us dig a trench with our own ship." Dale was silent. He thought of his own training. It was about attack, maneuver, overwhelming force. It was about ending the fight quickly. The human philosophy was the opposite. It was about withstanding. It was about accepting that the fight would be awful, and planning to be the one left standing in the rubble. "You make fear your tool?" Commander Vora asked from where she stood by the door. "We make it our foundation," Jean said. "We assume everything will break. So we build it so that when it breaks, it does not fall apart. Your ship is beautiful and powerful. But one surge took it offline because the power was all in one place. Our ship is ugly and slow, but the surge had nowhere critical to go. It just washed over us. We lost parts, but not the whole." Dale leaned back in his chair. The shame he had felt began to transform into a staggering realization. He had mistaken their caution for cowardice. He had mistaken their questions for weakness. They were not looking at his weapons because they wanted to avoid them. They were looking at his weapons to see how they would fail and how to survive when they did. They did not come from a culture of conquest. They came from a culture of survival. And after today, he was starting to understand that in the long, cold silence of space, survival might be the most formidable trait of all. The humans did not celebrate their bravery. They were already talking about joint repair efforts, about sharing shield modulation data to better handle ionic storms. The battle was over. Now came the work of continuing. For them, that was the whole point. The meeting ended not with ceremony, but with a shared purpose. The humans returned to their ship, but this time, the shuttle carried a team of Kthari engineers with it. Captain Dale had ordered it. It was a small gesture, but it was real. On the Steadfast, Jean led the Kthari through the damaged sections. The alien engineers moved with a new kind of care. They saw the human repair crews already at work. The atmosphere was focused, not frantic. People spoke in calm voices. They used tools that were simple but effective. Jean showed them the breached hull section. A large, ragged hole was sealed behind a heavy, transparent polymer barrier. Inside, repair drones welded new support beams. "The compartmentalization worked," Jean explained. "We lost that storage bay, but the sections around it are intact. The ship's structure is a honeycomb. You can lose many cells and the whole remains." One of the Kthari engineers, a senior technician named Kale, touched the polymer seal. It was thick and flexible. "This is not a standard military barrier. It's a commercial mining sealant," Jean said. "Cheap, strong, and we carry kilometers of it. It's not pretty, but it holds air in and vacuum out. We have 5 different ways to patch a hole. This was just the fastest." Kale looked around. He saw cables neatly bundled, color-coded. He saw emergency panels every few meters, brightly marked. He saw backup oxygen canisters locked to the walls. Everywhere he looked, he saw layers of backup plans. It was not elegant. It was crowded, functional, and incredibly robust. "Your ship is prepared for pain, Kale observed. Jean nodded. Pain is information. It tells you where you are weak. We listen to it. On the Kethra's will, Sumi walked with Commander Vora. They were in the ship's medical bay. Sumi was checking on the Kthari crew who had been injured during the system failures, mostly burns from overloaded consoles or bruises from falls. Sumi spoke softly to a young warrior whose arm was bandaged. She asked about his pain level, about his sleep. Vora translated when needed. The warrior was surprised by the questions. On the Kthari ship, you were expected to endure. If he does not sleep well, his reflexes will be slow tomorrow, Sumi said to Vora. Small weaknesses add up. A chain is only as strong as its most tired link. Vora watched as Sumi moved to the next patient. The human's compassion was not just kindness. It was a form of systems maintenance. Keeping the crew functional was part of keeping the ship functional. It was all connected. Later, Vora found Captain Dale on the bridge. He was staring at the main screen, which now showed a clear external view. The Steadfast was visible, its scars clear under the work lights of repair drones. The human engineer, Jean, Vora said. He gave our technicians 12 suggestions for improving system redundancies. Small things, separating power lines, adding manual override switches in accessible places. He was not trying to sell us anything. He just saw things that could break. Dale did not turn. And their doctor? Sumi? She is assessing crew fatigue. She says our recovery will be slower if we ignore the stress of the event. She called it psychological debris that needs to be cleared along with the physical. Dale finally looked at her. Psychological debris. The phrase was foreign, but the meaning was clear. They manage everything. The machine, the body, the mind. It is all one system to them. It seems so, Vora said. They do not see a warrior and a ship. They see a single, complex unit that must be kept operating under stress. And they assume stress is a constant. A call came in from the Steadfast. It was Captain Park. Captain Dale, we have finished a preliminary analysis of the ionic surge pattern. The nebula's activity is cyclical, but predictable. We are transmitting a safe navigation path out of the region. Our engines are at 40%. We can lead the way if you are able to follow. Dale looked at the data as it appeared on his screen. It was a clear, simple route, avoiding the densest energy pockets. The humans had used their battered sensors and their own damaged ship's experiences to map a path to safety. We can follow, Dale said. Your ship? Are you sure it can make the journey? Over the speaker, they could almost hear Park's slight smile. The Steadfast can make it. She has had worse. We will go slowly. There is no rush. The journey out of the nebula took hours. The Steadfast moved ahead, its engines glowing a steady, gentle blue. The Kethra's will followed, its own systems still fragile. They moved at the pace of the wounded. On the bridge of the human ship, Jean monitored the power levels. Sumi reviewed the crew's vital signs, sent from wrist monitors. Everyone was tired, but no one was at breaking point. They had planned for this too. On the Kthari bridge, the mood was different. The crew worked, but they were quiet. They watched the human ship ahead of them, a blocky silhouette against the colorful nebula gases. There was no disdain left. There was only a deep, thoughtful silence. Dale thought about the human's answer. We are terrified of it. He had spent his life believing that courage was the absence of fear. Now he saw a ship that had been deliberately built by people who were so afraid that they poured their fear into every weld, every circuit, every drill. Their courage came not from ignoring the danger, but from staring directly at it, understanding it completely, and then building a box to contain it. The Steadfast was that box. It was not a sword. It was a lifeboat. And in the storm, a lifeboat was what they had all needed. As the ships finally cleared the last tendrils of the nebula and entered calm, open space, Dale let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The stars were sharp and clear again. A final message came from the Steadfast. Safe journey, Kethra's will. We will be at Accord Station 7 for repairs. If you need further assistance, our channel is open. Dale keyed his mic. Thank you, Steadfast, for the path. And for the lesson. This time, the words did not feel stiff. They felt necessary. He switched off the comm and looked at Vora. "Prepare our full assessment report for the Galactic Accord," he said. His voice was firm, but his eyes were on the retreating human ship. "And change my previous notes. Do not describe them as a non-martial species. Describe them as a persistent species. And note that their capacity for calculated sacrifice and systemic endurance exceeds any design paradigm in our records. They do not fight like us, but they endure in a way we do not understand. And we must." He turned back to the stars. The galaxy suddenly felt larger and stranger and far more interesting. 2 standard cycles later, the Kethras will docked at Accord Station 7 for repairs. The station was a massive ring of metal and light, bustling with ships from a dozen different species. Captain Dale's ship was directed to a primary repair bay. Its elegant hull needed extensive work. As his crew began the disembarkation process, Dale looked out a viewport. In a smaller, secondary bay not far away, he saw the Steadfast. It was already surrounded by scaffolds and repair drones. Humans in simple work clothes moved over its hull, cutting away damaged plates and welding new ones. The work was fast and efficient. There was no ceremony, only labor. Dale made a decision. He did not take a full honor guard. He only took Commander Vora with him. They walked through the station's wide corridors. Other species glanced at the Kthari captain, some with recognition, some with curiosity. He paid them no mind. They reached the repair bay for the Steadfast. The air smelled of welding torches and lubricant. The sounds were the clangs of metal and the hum of machinery. It was not quiet, but it was orderly. He saw Jean first. The human engineer was out of his sling. He stood on a scaffold, directing a crane that was lowering a new hull plate into place. He spoke into a headset, his voice calm. "Easy. Left a little. Good. Engage maglocks." The plate settled into place with a solid thud. Sumi was below, at a makeshift table set up with consoles. She was coordinating the crew rotations, making sure those who had been working for hours took breaks, had water, were replaced by fresh teams. She looked up and saw Dale and Vora. She said something into her own headset, then walked over to them. "Captain Dale," she said. She still had a small healing cut on her forehead, but she smiled. "Welcome. Your ship is okay." "It will be," Dale said. "Thanks to yours." He looked past her at the activity. "You work quickly. The sooner she's whole, the sooner she can go back out," Sumi said simply. "Would you like to see?" She led them on a walk around the perimeter of the bay. Dale watched the humans work. He saw the damaged sections from the debris impacts. The inner structure was exposed. He saw the honeycomb pattern Jean had described. He saw the thick polymer seals still holding in other areas, marked as temporary but secure. He saw something else, too. On a cleared section of hull near the bow, under the fresh scars, there were older marks. Faint discolorations from heat, pockmarks from tiny impacts, subtle patches that were a slightly different shade of gray. This ship had been hurt before, and fixed before. "Your ship, it has seen much," Dale observed. Jean had climbed down and joined them, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She's 30 years old," he said, following Dale's gaze. "She's been through 2 asteroid belt surveys, a plasma storm, and a micrometeoroid shower that took out 3 sensor arrays. And now a nebula debris field." He said it with a hint of pride, like someone talking about a sturdy old tree that has weathered many storms. "And you do not retire her?" Vora asked. "Why would we?" Jean looked puzzled. "She still flies. Her core is strong. We just replace the parts that wear out. Every scar is a lesson learned. The next ship we build will have even better compartmentalization because of what we learned here." Dale understood now. The Kthari built ships to be glorious, and when they were too damaged, they were decommissioned, their honor preserved. Humans built ships to be repaired. Their honor was in the continuing service, not the pristine condition. He stopped walking and turned to face them. "I have filed my assessment with the Galactic Accord," he said formally. "I told them that humanity's strength is not what we thought. It is not in seeking battle. It is in enduring its aftermath. I said you are masters not of war, but of consequence. Sumi listened, her head tilted. That is a very kind way to put it, Captain. We just call it stubbornness. It is more than that, Dale insisted. His old certainty was gone, replaced by a hard-won respect. You looked at a losing situation. You accepted damage. You managed the loss piece by piece to preserve the whole. My culture teaches us to win. Yours teaches you to outlast. Jean nodded slowly. To outlast is to win another day. Maybe not today, but someday. That is the goal. A call came for Jean from the scaffold. He excused himself and went back to work, climbing up the metal frame with easy familiarity. Dale and Vora prepared to leave. Before he did, Dale offered a Kthari gesture of parting, a closed fist over the heart. It was a gesture of deep respect, usually reserved for fellow warriors of great honor. Sumi placed her own hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly in return. As they walked back through the station, the noise of the human repair bay fading behind them, Vora spoke. They will never be like us, Captain. They will not build grand fleets for show of force. No, Dale agreed. They will build resource transports with hulls that can stop a plasma bolt. They will build colony ships that can crash land and become a functional base. They will build hospitals that can be cut in half and still operate. He looked at the bustling station around him, imagining a future shaped by such a philosophy. They will not conquer the galaxy. They will simply spread across it. And when disaster strikes, as it always does, they will be the ones still standing there, fixing what broke, helping who they can. Not because they are fearless, but because they have practiced being afraid for 10,000 years. And they are very, very good at it. They reached the elegant, wounded form of the Kethra's will. Dale looked at its smooth lines, its beautiful, fragile power. For the first time, he saw its flaws. He saw the single points of failure. He saw the elegance that masked weakness. He turned for a final look down the long corridor toward the secondary bay. He could not see the Steadfast from here, but he could sense its presence. A simple, blocky, stubborn thing already being put back together. He knew then that the galaxy had just become a more complicated and a more interesting place. It was not a place just for warriors anymore. It was a place for survivors. And he had a feeling that in the long, silent story of the stars, the survivors would have the final word.